Next headline, essentially it is saying 1 in 3 millennials don't think that they'll retire. And even though these findings might not be particularly surprising, what's more telling in this article is that millennials actually have the rosiest expectations out of all the groups surveyed. Gen Z comes in at 37% believing they will not be able to comfortably retire. Gen X and baby boomers responded at 57 and 54% respectively. GC, what do you say about that?
My first thought was seeing all these commercials where we show people that are just absolutely enjoying retirement. And we have talked about how these commercials don't necessarily give you the path to retirement that most people actually need to take to get there. Specifically saying most people in these commercials think about a number that they need to have, a number that will allow them to retire comfortably. And we tend to think differently about that. It's about growing your passive income as far as wealth. But what I've always assumed in those commercials is that comfortable retirement was accessible for many people, maybe not everybody, but for many people, or at least people believed in the idea that they could be one of those people in the commercial. So, what jumped out to me when reading this article is like, wow, the idea that many Americans have in their mind of retiring comfortably just does not seem to be the reality when you actually talk to the majority of Americans today. And breaking it down by the different generations, I think, is really telling because, for 34% of millennials to say, no, I don't see myself being able to retire comfortably. To me, that's the generation that should have the most hope to do this. Like, if there is any generation right now that should have the most hope of retiring comfortably, it should be millennials. And
Well, the good and the bad news, GC, is that they do have the most hope, but it's only a 34%, 34% don't have that hope, right?
That is true. That is two sides to the same story. You're right. They do have the most hope out of these different cohorts, but overall, 34%, a third of them say it's not going to happen. It'd be really interesting. I was trying to find the data on what that percentage was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and to see the differences over time. But, for over a third of people, and we're both millennials, you're like an ancient millennial.
I am. I'm an elder millennial.
You're an elder millennial. I'm on the upper end of the millennial bracket. So to think that, retiring comfortably wouldn't be possible for people in our generation a little bit lower is sad, really. And it shows that, people aren't comfortable with not a lot of things in their minds. They're not comfortable with the amount of money that they're earning. They're not comfortable with the cost of living. They're not comfortable with the cost of living going up and increases. Not comfortable with the cost of healthcare going up. They're not comfortable with they don't have enough capital to invest. And for the ones who do have the capital to invest, there's a lot in that number there that do invest, but they're not comfortable that those investments are actually going to pan out and get them to a retirement that's comfortable for them. So it exacerbates the need for a different type of thinking when it comes to retirement investments. I think people have been thinking this for a long time, that the status quo just simply doesn't work. And so when I see, a study like this, it's disturbing. It makes me think there's a lot of people out there that we can help and that need a lot of help because, I think if you play your cards right in this country, you should be able to retire comfortably. And a lot of folks who are playing their cards right don't feel that way.
Yeah, man. Agreed. And I think it's been part of the core thesis of why we put this together. As somebody who would have told you 4 years ago that I don't see myself retiring comfortably, being able to be part of this community, right? And understand that real estate is a way that I can see that path for myself better than ever before. And then being surrounded by people that really care about this stuff, right? Like, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of confusion out there. There's definitely this idea that Social Security is not going to be there for me. There's this idea of like, man, what about my 401k? Like, is that really going to get me there? As somebody that before being an entrepreneur felt very uncomfortable with the way that my wages were or were not more aptly rising to keep up with cost of living in a city like Miami that I lived in, right? Which I can only imagine what it's like in San Francisco or what it's like in these other cities with an even higher cost of living. Something had to change. And, I got lucky that I got in here, right? I can tell you that now I do feel comfortable having three homes in my portfolio already. I'm already thinking about a couple of other real estate plays. And the idea that, like I've told you this, right? Like I hired Kelly to draw up a financial plan. Most people don't have that. Most
Mhm.
people don't have this like financial advisor that can show you the path to it and feel super comfortable with it. But I want to go through the actual stats here. 56% of Americans feel behind on saving for retirement. 37 feel significantly behind. 22% of workers say they didn't contribute to retirement in 2022 and 2023. 45% of Americans, it is unlikely they'll have enough to retire comfortably. And if we go through the generations, as we said, millennials, 34% of them don't see themselves retiring comfortably. Gen Z, 37% of them don't see themselves retiring comfortably. These are the two demographics that have the most time to like make up for this, right? The most hope, and they have time on their side. Then Gen X is 57% don't, and Boomers 54% don't, which I think is pretty alarming, man.
Pretty alarming. On one hand, boomers and Gen X, it's been a tougher road when some of these challenges that we faced as a country, as an economy, happen closer and closer to retirement age. It makes it harder. So on one hand, it's a little bit more understandable that their percentages are higher. On the other hand, still got a lot of time to be able to get you to a place where you can retire comfortably. And it's not just your investment decisions. It's, a lot of that is, mindset, team, right? Education, investments, right? All of that kind of a lot of those things that you just highlighted for yourself. Those are still opportunities out there. But I do think that it's been a tougher ride for a lot of our folks that are a little bit older and getting closer to retirement age. You think about the whirlwind with the last 3 years of COVID. You've got, the health concerns that were a part of COVID and continue to linger. They had to deal with raging inflation that we haven't seen in 40 years. So that concept of cost of living increases going up dramatically. I mean, we had to deal with 9% inflation up until last year. So you start to think of that could happen again. And you start to think of everything that you spend going up by almost, 10%. And that's a scary sign. So just a lot of challenges. So I start to understand it a little bit more, but that same feeling of being able to help folks. I mean, we have so many examples here in the community of folks that are in the baby boomer generation or Gen X generations that have taken a hold of their financial well-being and have made decisions that are not normal, that are not average, and they've had a similar trajectory as you. I'm sure some of our clients were feeling like they couldn't retire comfortably at some point closer to, those types of ages. And now they do, right? And so it shows the value of a community like this, the value of courage for our people to be able to make decisions that otherwise are not normal, right? The normal approach is not to go and buy a portfolio of single family rental properties in a city that's probably 1,000 miles from where you live, but that combination has really paid off for a lot of folks. And so I'm equally excited to help those people.